And that was Dr. Work It Out. It's quite appropriate, I hope, because we've got a bit of a doctor on the other end of the phone, a doctor with grass and goodness knows where else. Pete, are you there, Jim?
I am. Yeah, I wish I was a doctor. I don't have a PhD, unfortunately.
Very close to the best we've got, I'm afraid. But Jim, you are the conservation officer for the roaches, is that right?
Well, I work for Moors for the Future, yes, and I'm a conservation works officer, and one of my sites I've been working on is the roaches, yeah.
Yeah, and if we can cast a mind back to 2018, it's one of those things which at the time was horrific, and then it sort of goes out of many people's minds, but it was devastating for large areas of the roaches, wasn't it?
That's true, yeah. Unfortunately, there was a big wildfire started accidentally by somebody's campfire, that ended up burning about 60 hectares of what is a really kind of unique and precious landscape.
Yeah, 60 hectares in football fields, that's quite a lot, isn't it?
That is. Off the top of my head, it's somewhere in the region of 150.
Yeah, it's quite a lot quite a lot of Harrison Parks anyway. And of course, Pete is very useful to us, isn't it? And the area that was devastated was very useful to everyone, isn't it?
Absolutely. So our moorlands are one of the kind of most important habitats we have in the UK. We have extensive areas of peat and blanket bog, and they provide a home for all kinds of unique species, such as curlews and harriers and mountain hares and all kinds and things like that. They also play a really crucial function in water quality and preventing flooding. And when they're in really good condition, they can take in carbon, so they're crucial to tackling climate change. Yeah,
and it's gone down to a really big depth, hasn't it? It would take a long time for that peat, etc., to regrow, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely, yeah. The fire was really quite devastating. It burned quite intensely. We at Moors for the Future, we did an estimate of how much carbon was lost. It was about 3,500 tons of carbon. About 11,000 tons of carbon dioxide that was released into the atmosphere, and it's something that forms very slowly, about a millimetre a year. So it's thousands of years of accumulation of peat in the landscape, and that one fire, we estimate, destroyed about 50 years worth. There has been some regrowth of vegetation, but it's something that takes many years to recover.
Has the wildlife come back at all? Are you able to encourage that back?
There is wildlife there. Wildlife always finds a little way. We've been working on there recently, and I have seen curlews in the area and skylarks. Unfortunately, one of the impacts of the fire is a big reduction in the biodiversity. So you have certain things like heather and a couple of grasses which regrow, but lots of plants are missing there, so there's much less diversity than there was. And one of the things that we've been doing during our project is to reintroduce species. So we've been planting lots of different plant species, particularly sphagnum moss, but also we've been planting other moorland species like bilberry and crowberry and cotton grasses to attempt to really give a significant boost to the regeneration of the site. And introduce more diversity, which in turn will help encourage different species of wildlife to come back to the moor.
Sphagnum moss is one of those magical things, isn't it? Can you talk about it a little bit more?
Absolutely, it is one thing that we get really excited about at Moors for the Future. It's really the key species of moorlands, of blanket bogs and moorlands. It's what we might call an ecosystem engineer. It changes the conditions of the environment around it. It does this by it holds on to an astonishing amount of water. It holds 20 times its weight in water. It's fundamental to the health of a blanket bog and to the formation of peat.
Yeah, so it's really quite important. And I believe you are working as well on the blocking of gullies, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So There are across certain areas of moorlands. There are they've suffered about 100 years or so since the Industrial Revolution of degradation, of deterioration, due to many aspects. So one of the key ones is they have been dried out, and there are gullies which are, some of them are natural, some of them have been man-made many years in the past, and these essentially form channels of erosion and rushing water off the moor very quickly, and that takes with it lots of silt, lots of peat, and lots of other materials that flushes down into rivers and reservoirs, which in terms of drinking water is a very expensive thing to clean up. But also it means that the moorland is not as wet as it should be, so the conditions for the plants to thrive and for the wildlife to thrive up there is often not as good as it could be. So one of the major things we do in restoration is we will identify where we can build little dams, mini dams, a couple of meters across, in hundreds of different locations across a moorland, using stone or using peat or using other materials like heather bales, to create a series of little pools and dams to filter that water and slow the flow of that water off the moorland. And also, in effect, what that does is it pushes the flows of water back into the peat, saturating it, creating conditions where sphagnum can thrive and where peat can start to accumulate again.
I suppose that you in the Roaches and the Moorlands are quite happy about the weather we've been having recently. I mean, we on the lowlands are not involved with the work you do. Curse the rain, but I suppose you are quite welcoming it, aren't you?
Well, in one aspect, yes, it's wonderful to see kind of really wet, thriving, boggy peatlands. It's also, when we've done some works and they fill up with rain quite quickly, and you can see the effect, and you can see the positive effect that your work has had. But also, I would say, because of bird breeding season, we work outside from September until March. So in terms of going out day after day up onto the high moorlands in the rain, we don't welcome it that so much, I would say.
No, I can imagine not in that way. But, it's out in the fresh air at least. That's the compensation you can have, isn't it?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I really can't complain about that aspect of my job. It's really fantastic to be able to spend so much time in just beautiful, iconic landscapes, particularly like in the Roaches, where just it's evident of how many people go there day after day to experience that, to experience the views and the wildlife and the fresh air. So yeah, no, I'm really very fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, you get a huge number of visitors, don't you? And people walking, just enjoying the scenery, but also the rock climbers and so on, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a very popular landscape. People are very proud of it, and people like to feel like they have some ownership of it. And we welcome that absolutely. In one aspect, the more people that are out enjoying a place responsibly, the better it is for looking after these areas. Also, we've been very grateful to have the impact of so many volunteers helping us in different aspects of our work. We've had dozens of volunteers come out and help us plant sphagnum into the ground in some really quite tricky conditions. So, yeah, we're very grateful for that.
Yeah, the key word there was you want the people to come, but you want them to come responsibly, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, and the vast majority of people do. People don't go out into the natural environment set about to damage it. 99.9% of people don't, and most people are very responsible. But it is sometimes things that people don't realise that they're doing which could have a negative impact. For example, I don't think many people actually realise the potential consequences of having for example, a disposable barbecue, particularly out in woodlands or near the moorlands, because a lack of concentration or a small mistake can result in something really quite devastating.
Yes, it can. Finally, is yours a job for life then, this restoration project, or can you see a light at the end of the tunnel?
It's definitely an ongoing process. That's true. These things take a long time. In one respect, conservation work is never finished, because you can do a restoration project, but there's always ongoing work to be done. In terms of the roaches and Moors for the Future, we have kind of time-limited projects that we work on. We work on sites all over the Peak District and South Pennines. But thankfully, the Roaches has a really strong organisation which looks after it day to day. That's, of course, Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, who have really great dedicated people who look after the site.
Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I hope you managed to get over to the listeners the importance of enjoying the countryside, but using it responsibly, not using your barbecues there, and also appreciation of the work that you and your team do.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thanks very much, Jim. And that's Jim Randle, who's the Conservation Officer for the Roaches.